Hey, stay tuned. We're going to go through the steps to build a code plug for a DMR handheld radio. Hi, I'm Michael, KB9VBR, your host for Ham Radio Q&A. Well, do you enjoy entertaining and informative amateur radio videos? Then make sure you press that subscribe button and click the little bell to be notified when future videos are going to be released. Well, in my previous video, I took a look at the Retevis RT82 DMR dual band handheld radio. In a nutshell, this radio is a Motorola Tier 1 and Tier 2 compatible DMR radio with 3,000 channels, 5 watts on VHF, 4 watts UHF, and features good ergonomics and IP67 waterproof designation, so it's a rugged, pretty durable radio. And if you want to learn more about that radio, be sure to click on the little link in the upper right of the screen here, and that'll take you right to my initial review of the radio. But a DMR radio isn't any good unless you've got some channels programmed into it. So, programming your first DMR radio, it may seem a little bit challenging or daunting at first. It's certainly different than programming an analog radio, to say the least. So, but in part 2 on my continuing series on DMR radios, we're going to take a walk through the programming software to build a code plug or programming file for the Retevis RT82 handheld radio. This content, though, isn't limited strictly for the Retevis radios, because you'll find that the programming software is pretty similar from brand to brand of radios. So what I go through today is going to be equally applicable to some of the other brands of the Chinese DMR radios. So what is a code plug? Well, the code plug is the radio's programming software or programming file. DMR is a commercial radio standard, so a lot of the conventions and terminology from the commercial land mobile radio are part of the of what we're talking about when we work, operate, and program our DMR radios. So this can cause a little bit of confusion if you're coming from the amateur radio side of things. But don't worry about that, because we'll go through any of the terminology that may seem confusing in the DMR world, and hopefully it'll make things a lot more easier to understand. All right, so let's get into setting up our DMR radio. Well, the first thing you're going to have to do is get yourself a DMR ID. So to do that, we're going to head on over to the DMR Mark website and select Register ID. And right there on the DMR Mark page will be the instructions onto how to register for a new DMR ID. You don't want the repeater ID, you'll just want a single user ID. If you're going to have more than one DMR radio, then you're going to need separate IDs. But if you just have one radio and maybe a hotspot, then one ID is all you need. Once you got your ID, we can continue on for programming. So we got our DMR ID. Next up is we're going to need to go over to the Retevis website, and under support, select resources and download the RT82 programming software. Under RT82 support, just scroll down and get the programming software for the Windows system. Get the USB driver for your cable. You may need the driver, you may not. It really depends on your system what drivers you've already got installed. I needed to install the driver to get everything to work, so your mileage may vary. Install the driver first and then install the software, and everything should be operational. So after you've downloaded the program, you've installed the driver, the next step up is to start up the Retevis program. And under program, you're going to want to do read data. And you're going to want to read the data from your radio into the computer. Once you've done that, save a backup copy of that file, and then use a second copy of that file that you've read to edit and create your new radio program. You should always save a blank copy of your programming file in case you need to go back to the original settings of the radio. Then it's you've got it there. And then a backup, so that's your backup copy. And then A copy of that is what you'll use to make your changes and then program back into the radio. Works better than trying to flash a radio from scratch. It's always seem to have more problems when you work with a blank file and then write it to the radio without reading a file first. Let's get into the meat of things. So I'm going to open up the basic settings on or the general settings on the programming file here, and I'm going to enter my radio name, which will be my call sign, and then the DMR ID, which I received from DMR Mark. The other settings you can change at your leisure. We're not gonna make those adjustments today. Now, there's three important concepts to consider in DMR radio programming, and that's the use of contacts, channels, and zones. A contact can be a talk group that you'll be using, or it can be an individual call sign. The channels will be the frequencies that you'll be using, either analog or digital. And then a zone is a selection of channels that are logically grouped together. So when you program a radio for a repeater, there will be several talk groups that you'll be using to interface with the repeater. You'll assign a talk group for accessing a reflector, another talk group for dropping a reflector, and a third talk group for just talking on that particular reflector. It may seem that talk groups and contacts are used interchangeably, or talk groups and reflectors are used interchangeably, but they're a little bit different. Reflectors, of course, are that series of linked repeaters in the cloud that people are communicating on, and talk groups are nothing more than like filters or actions that are used to access or interface with the reflectors or another person on another DMR radio. So the talk group is nothing more than just a code to be used for communication or a code to be used for filtering. So let's talk about programming this radio then. I am using the information to program a repeater on the Tri-State DMR network. This is a network that's located in Wisconsin, Indiana, and Illinois. There's 11 linked repeaters, and it's really the closest DMR repeater to my physical location. But they've got a real nice list of talk groups that they use in their repeaters. It's a smaller list, very neat and clean. So it's easy to show how this whole process works by using their information. So let's first set up our radio for the talk groups that are on this repeater. There are 7. Each repeater has 7 different talk groups for either talking on their Tri-State link system, or that's on slot 1, or any of the reflectors that are available on slot number 2. So to first do that, I'm going to go to digital contacts, and I'm going to add 7 contacts here. And our contact name is going to be the Tri-State network, and so I'll enter Tri-State as our name. And this is a group call, so it goes out to everybody, and it's going to be talk group number 8. So when I call out on talk group number 8, the repeater knows that on slot 1 that I'm contacting the Tri-State network. My next talk group is going to be the worldwide DMR talk group, and that's going to be talk group 1. So when I call out on talk group 1, the repeater knows that I want to be in the worldwide talk group, which is linked to the worldwide DMR reflector. North America is the third one, and then I'm just going to take a minute, and I'm going to finish typing these into the system and the disconnect. Now I also can add talk groups for individual call signs, and those could be used as a filter when a call sign, when another person using the DMR radio comes through to my radio, and their DMR code in my contact list matches. their call sign will show up on my radio screen, so I know who's talking. I can also do a private call to that person using their DMR ID, so the communication goes directly to their radio. And with that being set, we're going to move on next to the digital receive groups. So, like I said, talk groups are nothing more than filters, so we need to know that when a communication is coming out, a transmission is coming out from the repeater to our radio needs to know to open up the squelch so we can hear it. And we do that through our digital receive groups. DMR repeaters can have multiple reflectors running simultaneously on a time slot, and you may want to filter out. Say you don't want to hear worldwide, but you want to hear the North America reflector. You can enter the receive group call for the North America reflector so that you only hear those traffic and filter out the other traffic. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create a list called DMR Mark, and I'm going to pull all of my available contacts in from the available contacts, and I'm going to add those to my single digital receive group list. And you can have one receive group list with all of your contacts or talk groups in it, or you can set up separate receive groups with separate DMR talk groups, depending on how you want to kind of manage all of the information in your radio. If you're going to do a lot of scanning, setting up separate contacts might be better than setting up just one big global receive group. It really just depends on you. So with that being said, let's move on to channels. So in channels with analog radio, each simplex frequency or repeater pair would have its own channel. And that method also holds true with this radio. I can add analog frequencies. It has individual channels to the radio, but for digital, I need to do a little bit more work. Each talk group contact is going to need its own frequency channel. So for my DMR repeater, I'll add a channel for talk group number 8, which is on slot 1, and that's our tri-state network. And then 6 more channels for each of the talk groups that are going to be working on slot number 2. It's kind of a tedious process, but it's the way these DMR radio systems work. So let's move on to the channel information screen, and you'll see one default channel here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create 6 more channels. So I've got 6 channels or 7 channels here, ready to go. Go back up to channel number 1, and it's going to be digital. And this is going to be our tri-state channel. So we'll give it a name. It's going to need a receive frequency, and I'm going to set this up for a repeater in the Milwaukee area. So I'm going to add, that's the W9 EMP repeater, or 341.875. And the transmit frequency offset of 5 megahertz, so 449.41875. Admit criteria is going to be set to the color code, so that's kind of like the tone squelch. So as the transmissions come back via the particular color code, the radio will open up and I'll hear that traffic. Okay, contact names. This is going to be the tri-state network. Group list is going to be our DMR Mark group, and color code for the repeater is 9. So, and repeater slot number 1 for our tri-state network. And we're done with that. I'm going to go over here and click on channel 2, set this to digital, and channel 2 is going to be our worldwide channel. And I'm going to enter the frequency again. As you can see, this is the reason why programming DMR radios get a little bit tedious, because we have to add this information in over and over again. 443.41875, 449.41875. Set our admit criteria set our contact name as worldwide. Our group list is DMR mark. Our color code is 9. And this is slot number 2. You said those other reflectors are all on slot number 2 for this repeater. Okay, now we're going to go to channel number 3. Now you can see we're going to have to type in all this stuff over and over again. It gets kind of cumbersome, but there's a way we can kind of speed things up. So I'm going to right click on this worldwide channel. I'm going to hit copy. Then I'm going to go to channel 3 and I'm going to hit paste. And all of that information was copied over. So now all I got to do is change what's different. So channel 3 is going to be North America. And frequency, color code, contact name, set that to North America. Group list, repeater slot, that's all good. I'm going to go to channel 4 and I'm going to hit paste. And I'm going to change that to worldwide English. And all of that's the same. Contact name, worldwide English, DMR mark, that looks good. All right, and now this process is repeated over and over again. You can add your analog channels this way, you can add your simplex channels this way, and use the copy and the paste command to sort of speed things up if you've got a lot of talk groups that you need to assign to a specific set of channels. But after the channels have been defined, we're going to need to create our zones. Zones are the logical groups of channels, and if you've got more than one DMR repeater in the area, you might want to make a zone for each of those repeaters and put the pertinent channels in each zone. Or if you're traveling to different regions, you could have different zones for each regions. You could have zones for your analog channels, or you can have zones for your simplex channels. Like I said, they're logical groups to kind of organize things, because we're going to have, when you really start programming this radio, you're going to end up with a lot of channels. So the zones kind of give you back your sanity. So with that, we're going to close this and go into our zone information. And there's one default zone already in here. And we're just going to, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this zone here, give it a zone name. And since I'm programming my radio for a repeater down in the Milwaukee area, I'm just going to call it Hales Corners. And I could give it the repeater call sign if I wanted to do that, or anything else that makes sense to me. All of my available channels I can select, and I can add those over to channel member A. There's also a channel member B. Remember, the Retevis radio is a dual band radio, and it's got dual watch, so we can add our zones to the main band and also for the sub band. So that means you can monitor two different channels within the same zone. You could monitor simplex or different repeater, or two different repeaters, or you could monitor slot 1 or slot 2. You know, it really depends on how you want to listen in. But but as you create your zones, you'll need to add those channels for channel member A and channel member B. So that's it on zones. We've created our zones. We've added our channels to the zones. We made our contacts and added those to the channels. Really, we're at this point we're complete. There's a few other things we can do to tweak our radio. We can build scan lists. I'm not going to get into scanning today, but that's another thing we can do to make the radio a little bit more useful for our needs. But at this point, all I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit the file button. I'm going to go save. Okay, I saved my file, and now we're going to want to write the program to the radio. So that's as simple as going program and write data to radio, and I'm going to hit OK. And my radio lights up, and it's dumping the program from the computer into the radio. Well, there you have it, how to program the Retevis RT82 DMR dual band radio. Now, one nice thing about the Retevis is that you can make changes to the programs on the radio itself. So if you make any changes on the radio and then decide to go into the computer again, you're going to have to read that file from the radio and then upload it to the computer, make your changes, and then dump it back down again. if you just work from the computer and write back to the radio, you might overwrite any of those previous changes you made on the radio side only. Well, do you have any questions on programming your own DMR radio? I'd love to hear them, so please leave your questions in the comments below. I'm going to be making a follow-up video as part of my DMR series, and I'll address any of these questions and comments you received and share them with everybody. So please make sure you drop me your questions before the follow-up video gets done in about a week or so. I've also provided a couple links in the video description that I found helpful in programming a DMR radio, so you're going to want to check that out too. There's a couple other videos I found that were really informative in the whole programming process. And then check those out for more detailed information. And finally, if you go over to my blog at www.jpole-antenna.com, I'll have a copy of my code plug here, so you can see what a sample code plug for the Retevis radio looks like, and hopefully that'll be helpful in building your own DMR code plug. As always, if you like this video, please give me a big thumbs up. I really appreciate that. Head on over to my blog at www.jpole-antenna.com. More articles and information are there. And also hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. The link is right down below me there. And check out this video that popped up alongside me. You might find it interesting. Well, that's it for another episode of Ham Radio Q&A. I'm Michael, KB9VBR. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and 73.